nowhere.
All right, man. Welcome to Crow 777 Radio. This is episode 299. We're one away from 300, but we have Jason Lingering with me today, and Clive DeCarl is back from across the way in England. We're going to get into a bunch of interesting things here, new technology, old technology. The so-called Tesla device, which we can't name by name, will be in hour 2. All you need to do is go back to the last episode with Clive to understand what that device is. It gets censored if you call it by name. It's ridiculous. Other things we probably will cover in hour 1 is selenium and some other health ideas. We may get into corporation. There's a whole litany of things we've thought about covering, but certainly the things I've mentioned will come up. Welcome, Jason.
And good morning.
Is this going to go out soon enough for you to announce where you're going to be? I think Rose just sent me a trailer from Karen B.
Right. Karen B is putting on a Solar Return Festival, music and arts and things like that, and I will be performing a set of my original music acoustically. That is on March 27th in Greenville, South Carolina. Check out the website at flatearthfestivals.com.
Before we get Clive in, the only other thing is there's a good chance I'll be walking away from Twitter in the next month or two. I proved last night that they've got an algorithm blocking my feed. We did an episode with Peggy Hall on masks and other things, just stating matter-of-factly, and they blocked it. Not only did they block it, over the last month, they've reduced my followers by, 2,700 plus, something like that. It's ridiculous. It's a clown show, and it's really not worth participating in. So I may make a show of quitting Twitter and stating the reasons why, because these ass clowns need to be dealt with. They have no right to censor free speech that isn't harming anyone. Anyhow, welcome, Clive.
Thank you very much, Crow and Jason. Lovely to be with you again.
Hey, man, how have you been? It's been, it's been a few months, hasn't it?
Yeah, well, I've been in England over winter, which is somewhere I swore I'd never spend another winter ever again. But actually, it's been quite nice. And I've been having a great time. The only shock I get is when I go out and I see people wearing masks. I can't get used to it in any way, shape or form. I go into the supermarket and I'm literally the only person who's not wearing a mask, in my town anyways.
Clive, it's disturbing. And even for people doing it, I think there's a level of disturbing, because what you notice on television was they started to make this push where everybody you saw, you couldn't see their face, and the masks kept getting bigger all the way up to the bottom of their eyes, to the point of ridiculousness. But now they've backed off that, if you'll notice, and they've done their kind of clown show. Now everything's done over the internet, whether it's on TV or not, but they have removed a lot of the imagery of people wearing masks, and I think that indicates that it's wearing thin. I suspect as we come into spring, another boot's going to drop, because here they're already playing their numbers are going down game, but we're not fooled, are we?
Well, as a sign of what's going on in England, now, for the first time, for a long time, a third of all UK children under 5 years old are getting charity food because their parents can't afford to feed them. A third of all UK children are on the food stamp equivalent. And whereas as they grow fast, there used to be thrift shops here in England, but they're all closed. So, the really poor are suffering quite substantially, and clearly it's only going to get worse because the economy is being destroyed. It's absolutely outrageous. But in France, they do things slightly differently. In the press over there, 85 people got arrested at a house party, and a lot of people escaped. And what was their crime? Was it breaking curfew? What was it? It was having an orgy without masks and social distancing.
That almost sounds like a made-up story to me, but okay. That is a bit ridiculous. But it goes to show, Clive, there's method to this madness. You might get sick, so we're going to destroy the world economy. It's beyond the pale for something so illogical to have been so acceptable by so many minds. But then again, we don't know for certain that's the case. And as a matter of fact, what I see around where I am, all the people that come to my home or the people that I have to interact with, plumbers and other people in a normal day's course, they're not buying anymore. As a matter of fact, they're showing up. I can see who they are. It's gone. But you are absolutely right. We've got a similar thing going on here where the major corporations have been green lighted. Sure, you stay open all day. You can hold 100,000 people in your football field sized warehouse shop. But all you ma and pa's who make their life's blood, you've got to close. And it's a bit disturbing because on the face of it, when you stop and think about it, it's clear what's going on. There is no logic to this. You might get sick, so we're going to destroy the world, the economy, and small business, and make people who don't have a lot of money have less money. It's all beyond. And I've said this for a long time. This is a house of cards we're looking at. And I don't buy for a second that technology is going to somehow be the police force they think it is, their little 5G network or whatever going on. At some point, people are going to have to say, we got to live, leave us alone. But anyhow, let me cue this up. So everybody knows, under every single show, free or full, on crow777radio.com, in the upper left hand under the audio is an image to Clive DeCarl. It links to his shop. And for my part, he saved me from a hand surgery with magnesium. He gave me the keys I needed to reverse the fact that people I've got to take care of could no longer recognize their children. I have that well in hand now. It's not 100%, but well in hand. My wife had a thing on her eye, not really quite a sty. That went away. This is all based on just knowledge that I've gained from people like Clive DeCarl, David Avocado Wolf, others. And you will notice that the images that link under my episodes are there for basically this purpose mostly, because they offer different things. And to put a fine point on it, people offering natural products seem to be coming under heavy censorship on top of everything else. But Clive, do you want to jump into selenium? I understand you've been doing a lot of research on it recently.
Well, it's such an amazing mineral. It's a trace element, and it would normally be found in food. You wouldn't consider supplementing with it, but obviously modern farming has wiped out every nutrient virtually in food these days, as we all know. So it's almost essential that people need to either deliberately eat their way to enough selenium, and it can be in yeast, it can be in Brazil nuts, it can be in pistachio nuts, but it's absolutely vital. I want to run through a few of the things that selenium can benefit. And everything, for instance, that we think of as a virus, from HIV to anyone you like, and this has been proven by doctors, it's been known about for a very, very long time, selenium is part of the immune system. It is so massively important if you want to keep well. And let me give you some examples. People with enough selenium have 5 times more tumor-killing cells, right? So that's essentially 5 times less cancer. There are people who have cardiomyopathy. Selenium is one of the big protective measures against having such a problem. There's dwarfism, right? Some people are born as dwarves. It's a selenium deficiency. Some people have fibromyalgia. One of the big bases of it is a selenium deficiency.
I got to jump in there, Clive. So for someone who has children that are dwarves, does that mean if the mother and father's selenium levels would have been up, that likely would not have occurred?
Yes.
Wow, I had no idea.
I'll cover some more of the many things that selenium works on, but let me just tell you something that's sort of interesting. Couples who are having unprotected sex, the woman is generally doing absolutely fine for selenium and probably for zinc, because sperm contains zinc and selenium. So this might explain why late teenage boys, are particularly low on selenium because of what they're doing a lot of. As all this sort of gentle sort of area is linked, what about prostate? Would you suspect that most men with prostate issues are low on selenium and zinc? Well, they are. Absolutely primary. So making sure you've got a healthy prostate for your life, you want to make sure you've got the right levels of zinc and selenium.
Let me jump in here again, Clive. Selenium is one of the things that is on your site that you actually sent me. If I remember correctly, my wife was using it. Sounds like I should be using it more, being male. And usually males are the guys that get the prostate trouble when they get older. It's in is it a sesame oil, if I remember correctly?
No. It's an incredibly interesting oil called tung, Tung, tung oil. And must have been, I don't know, 40, 50 years ago that Dr. Ravici did the research with selenium in this form. It seems to be the most preferentially absorbed of any form of selenium because it's bonded to a fatty acid. But there is one that people can buy locally in the store, which is selenomethionine. Selenomethionine. But the one that we sell is a very different type of selenium. I mean, selenium from food would be the best, but the selenium that we sell has had a huge history with reversing addictions, which we mentioned in the last show. And just about 3 days ago, I had this guy, heroin addict for 20 years. He reckoned that the selenium was the thing that was able, after trying to quit many times, the way he succeeded, because selenium turns off the antitoxins that are made when somebody takes something that's essentially a poison. But on top of that, eyesight, everything I'm saying basically is from absolute clinical research. Eyesight, people given the right dose of selenium, 80% of them reported an improvement. I mean, that's massive. With the hemorrhagic fever, where people can bleed to death in China, a doctor there, the normal mortality is 80% with hemorrhagic fever. With selenium, it went down to 20%. And that doctor's name, interesting enough is Doctor Who.
Huh.
So they've looked at the teeth from bodies that were buried a couple of thousand years ago from Greece. The ancient Greeks, their teeth are still examinable. And so it turns out that all the ancient Greeks had perfect teeth, like many people in the old days would have done, but their teeth contained 3 times the selenium in the dentine compared to what we have now. So is selenium good for teeth? Absolutely it is. Thyroid is all about selenium and iodine. With selenium, one can properly convert T4, which is the thyroid hormone with 4 iodines in it, to T3 with 3 iodines. And the problem people have got, most of the reason that people are going wrong health-wise, apart from just nutritional deficiency, is that they're eating sugar and grains, or I should be more specifically, refined grains. So onward with selenium. Selenium allows the heart cells to contract properly. So if somebody's got an enlarged heart, for instance, lack of selenium may be the reason. So then there's alcohol. One of the ways you can prove selenium's working in you is if you're one of these people who's got liver spots, that sort of brown spots on the skin, that's where the fat in the body is being oxidized, basically. And selenium will reduce that by cleaning the liver and doing a whole host of things. So people actually see their liver spots disappear. And there are a lot of people, particularly, older people who've got a damaged liver, and even though they're called liver spots, haven't put together that it is a liver issue. And selenium, literally, people can see, generally speaking, their liver spots disappear, which is great. You want good skin? Selenium. If people aren't absorbing fat properly, or they're not exercising enough and the lymph is blocking up, stagnating, they call it lymphedema. And again, selenium has been shown in clinical practice to reduce lymphedema in 1 hour, right? It can take days, but 1 hour is pretty impressive. And in a hospital, they would have given antibiotics and all sorts, generally, because for the most part, the doctors, unfortunately, haven't been told about selenium in any form. So, inflammation, pancreatitis, septicemia, pneumonia, mortality reduced drastically from these things. And, we're talking about a current situation where people are getting pneumonia-like diseases. You can recover from stroke damage. German hospitals have been known to give 1,000 micrograms of intravenous selenium and totally start to reverse the damage that's just done by a recent stroke. Every doctor really should know this stuff. You'd think they would.
So, Clive, if I got the oil wrong, because now that I'm thinking about it, it's got a peculiar taste. the selenium that you're providing. I think that's why I thought it was sesame oil, because it reminded me of that. But if it was you, because you're basically talking about published studies for the most part, and since we don't give medical advice, if it was you and you were just starting out and you suspected that you've been eating a lot of processed food and you're deficient in all kinds of things, how would you ingest the selenium that you provide? Would you put a certain amount of drops in water, or how would you do it?
I normally put it straight into my mouth. I don't like the taste that much, but it's not that bad. And so if I was starting, I would try one drop and see if you feel any different. Probably one's not going to necessarily feel any different, but inflammation might have gone down. If you get it right, things can happen pretty much right away. But I would try one drop. Now, one drop is about 500 micrograms, and that would be at the upper end of a dose. 350 micrograms, 400 micrograms for the average-sized adult would probably be about right. So if you had one drop every couple of days, that might be a maintenance dose. But Dr. Ravici found that for maybe 3 days, this is not a recommendation, this is just what Dr. Ravici found, and they did all sorts of experiments in New York to back this up, and this was decades ago, that taking a very large dose, like 10 drops of selenium for about 3 days, not more, was what it took to help addicts get through it. So that would be considered a megadose. But you see, what happened was when selenium was first discovered, which must have been, I guess, in the 1920s, it was understood to be poisonous. And it got a reputation as the poisonous mineral. And then they realized, as with every material in the world, that it's about the dose. Too much of almost anything will kill you, but a little bit could be perfect for you from a homeopathic dose or whatever size the dose is. So selenium then got called the essential poison. It was known as the poison, so it's the essential poison. And selenium...
Is it a poison?
Well, like anything, I mean, you can drink too much water and die. Everything is a poison. It's always about the dose, right? And I mean, the nature of homeopathy, Hahnemann thought that if you took a poison and then you diluted it to, millionths of a dose, homeopathic amount, that it might have the opposite effect and cure you. And indeed, that's how homeopathy works. You take the poison and you take it down to such a level that it's actually, from a physics perspective, doesn't exist. And it does the opposite of being a poison. It's a healthy thing.
So is there any danger in the studies you've read for someone just starting out? What if someone did 5 drops? Is there any danger in these things based on the studies that you've read?
Well, the great thing is that this form of selenium, the liquid form we're discussing, is non-toxic. It's just not toxic. I don't know what effects super megadoses would have, and one shouldn't try it. Bearing in mind that 1 drop every couple of days would be a more than adequate dose. 1 bottle is going to last you a year at that sort of rate. But I maybe take 10 drops once every fortnight, maybe, or I might take 5 every 10 days, something like that. I'm not too worried about it, but the benefits are so huge. Well, happiness, right? Happiness and brain function. If somebody's depressed, there's so many answers to depression, vitamin D and magnesium and many things. But selenium, again, a proven one, children, babies, pregnancy, almost every single birth defect is likely to have a root in a selenium deficiency. I mean, it's been known. You see, selenium got discovered from veterinary work. White muscle disease is a thing that sheep get. And the vets had worked it out years ago because, drugs don't work with animals so much because they're too expensive. A sheep isn't worth very much. So they figured out, 100 years ago, you could fix white muscle disease with selenium. And then Dr. Wallach realized that you could cure cystic fibrosis, because cystic fibrosis is white muscle disease, but of humans, with selenium. Due to that work, people have realized that everything from cleft palate to all the birth defects one could possibly think of, almost all of them are just simply deficiencies. And selenium is top of the list of things. Maybe that's the one.
Is this another one of those, our modern food supply is total crap and nutrient lacking, so of course we don't have this one either?
Well, that's right. And again, they've known it for a long time because selenium's been known for a long time. They've studied soils. It's been understood for a long time, and it's not like it's expensive particularly. So most people could really afford it. There are a few things that sort of go with it. If you go for the selenomethionine version, which methionine is an amino acid, methionine is the only amino acid that can be used to replace other ones. It's super interesting. I mean, amino acids are a whole other subject, and we've talked about amino acids a little bit in the past.
Let me jump in. So while you were talking, while you were responding to Jason, I have my wife go get the selenium that you sent me, and I took a single drop, and I kind of felt like I perked up right away. Is that normal? And the reason I did it is because I remembered it had a unique taste, and that's why I was thinking sesame oil. It's almost like a herb, not an herb, but like not cumin, but in that vein is it's a strange taste, not offensive. But I did a single tiny drop, and I felt like I perked up. Is that? Do you notice that?
Well, personally, I don't. But people are getting extraordinary results, like being able to suddenly give up heroin. That's sort of pretty massive. I mean, somebody's got to go through that. I would suggest would mean that they would have felt quite good with themselves to have gone through with it, if that makes sense.
Well, when you come off a drug like heroin, and believe me, I grew up in Southern California from the 70s and the 80s, the withdrawals, I mean, you almost wish you were dead. You would feel so bad. I've known people who have done it. So is what you're suggesting, based on the studies you've read, is that somehow the withdrawal is reduced, or is it the recovery time that is speeded up, or how would you describe that?
Well, when you take in a toxin, the body produces an antitoxin. And so when you give up something too fast, you get DTs with alcohol, withdrawal with some drugs, the selenium stops the antitoxins from being produced. And so, whereas you would have felt awful, people find they don't feel nearly so awful and don't feel drawn back into the alcohol abuse or whatever it is, because they just feel better, feel happier. Now, there are 500, more than 500 clinical studies on what I'm talking about. That's a lot, 500. And even the FDA, Dr. Schrauser, one of the main selenium doctors working on it for 50 years or whatever, he sued, I think, the FDA, and they had to admit that it can reduce the risk of certain cancers, that it is an anti-cancer substitute. And the way it works is it allows the production of glutathione. And glutathione is the most powerful antioxidant, thousands of times better in a way than vitamin C. And we rust as we get old in as much as we oxidize, that the fat in our body oxidizes, and there's an accumulation of that. But glutathione, produced by as a product of selenium, reduces that. One of the reasons why the liver spots disappear and so on. I mean, basically, selenium reduces DNA damage. And what's happening to us in this world right now is severe DNA damage.
You brought up an interesting point. Does the FDA acknowledge any other vitamins or nutrients or anything like that to actually do anything, or is it just drugs?
Well, I mean, obviously they're bought and paid for by the drug industry, so they're unlikely to praise anything unless they're taken to court and forced to admit it, I think, is how it is.
So I want to circle back, because I know every time we've mentioned addictions, Clive, the emails have just poured in. And so clearly I'm not the expert, and, but I can steer people to where they can go educate themselves and do other things. I can show them where to get products, healthy, natural products. But if I followed, This is addiction in general, because as we come into the new age, we're finding a lot of people are trying to kick the old heroin, the old alcohol, but pain pills has been a huge one. People have tried to put kratom to use to do that, which they've had some success. But could we say, with any confidence, based on all those studies that you've been pouring through, that addiction in general, the withdrawal, for lack of a better term, is alleviated to a more manageable level? Is that a fair statement?
Well, absolutely. I mean, if you put together amino acids, and there's masses of proof that amino acids work when it comes to making addiction easier. There are clinics out there offering amino acid therapy, intravenous amino acids over a 10-day period. If you add fulvic minerals, which are one of the best detoxification products on the planet,
Love that stuff.
If you add charcoal, if you add vitamin C, vitamin D, and then truckloads of magnesium. Again, the point is that when somebody is going to change their life drastically, they want to be as happy as they possibly can be. So adding vitamin D, lots of magnesium, they should feel good about themselves, and then it makes the whole thing easier. You know, magnesium is the miracle mineral, even beyond selenium, I would say.
I'm firsthand proof of that, Clive. To refresh memories, I was on the air with Clive. I was telling him my sister had to get her hand cut for what's called a trigger finger, basically your finger locking up in a position so you can't open it. I was getting the same thing, couldn't play my mandolin, couldn't barely do the keyboard. On the air, Clive said, "I've sent you magnesium, take it." Within 30 minutes, I felt better. Now, I take magnesium, and when he's saying by the truckload, and this is not a recommendation, this is what I do for me. I take 2 of the magnesium capsules probably 6 times a day, and my hand is, for all intents and purposes, almost all the way better. I also do the iodine and the fulvic, which I've also applied to people I'm responsible for who came to a point where they couldn't recognize their own children. And as I mentioned early on, I have that well in hand. So Clive's not telling you anything that I haven't proven firsthand. And I would absolutely state that magnesium is a bit like an essential thing. How could I have lived my whole life not knowing? And I'll say another thing that I learned based on what Clive had sent me. Clive has a special blend of magnesium. Now, when I went to CVS, because Customs was screwing with Clive's deliveries, I ended up getting one kind of magnesium and it didn't do the trick. So I pinged Clive. He said, well, maybe magnesium citrate. That did do the trick, but maybe not at the level of Clive's custom blend, or however that's properly stated. So you've got to realize, wandering into a drugstore, you've got to know what you're after, because these products, what I notice about the CVS things is, first of all, the dose is almost tiny, very low, not dose, but the effectiveness measurement, IU or whatever it would be, is almost always low. And you can get 2 things, both say magnesium, and I've done this, and one does nothing, and the other one helps a little bit. So I just wanted to get all that in, Clive, because it made a huge difference in my life. Because the VA was telling me I had to get my hand, needed surgery, so I would have been cut open, and I didn't have to do any of that.
Well, I had a similar experience, when I learned about magnesium 35 years ago, because I'd been in hospital for weeks. I got arthritis so badly that I couldn't walk or get dressed or anything like that. And it was magnesium, essentially, a few other things, but primarily magnesium that got me out of hospital and totally reversed all my arthritis. And so for 35 years, I haven't had any. But I was so bad, I looked like I was 100 years old, And with the magnesium dose, you're right, the by truckloads, most people can take 2 capsules at a time. And for a period of time, they might benefit by taking up to 12 capsules a day.
Wouldn't that put you in the toilet all day long?
Well, if you were taking 2 6 times a day, if you end up in the toilet, then that was much too much and you need to back off. But I find that almost everybody is so low on magnesium that I don't think it's maybe 1 in 100 or something that says that 12 was too much. Now, later on down the line, once you've built your levels up for a few weeks or a couple of months or something, one might be able to cut down dramatically down to 2 a day or 4 a day or 6 a day. But it's almost always more than people think. And stress burns up magnesium, and we're all way stressed with EMFs and the world. So everybody is low on magnesium. Everybody, because we're stressed as if it's a war, which it is, obviously. So then we're hit by things like estrogen. People drinking water out of plastic bottles, drinking water where the birth control pills, which is the biggest selling drug in the world, are in the water supply going round and round. People have got way too much estrogen generally. And magnesium, just like selenium, is essential for making glutathione, which deals with the estrogen. So, we're in a very dangerous state with everybody's hormones because of the birth control pills and a number of other things. So what sorts out hormones? Well, cholesterol, right? All the hormones are built on cholesterol. And what else? All the hormones are built on iodine. And there are epidemics out there. There's an epidemic of magnesium deficiency, which is causing muscle cramps, arthritis, twitches, constipation, poor sleep, worry, anxiety. There's a massive problem with a lack of iodine causing thyroid problems, dry skin, poor memory, temperature out of control, all the menopausal issues. There are basically about 10 nutrients that are so available, so inexpensive, that if you went to a doctor and they just gave you these 10, without even asking you hardly any questions, I would suggest we could empty the hospitals 90% with these 10. It's outrageously amazing that people don't know.
I consider it essential, Clive. Every day I'm using the fulvic, the iodine, the magnesium without fail. And we should probably mention this too. What I noticed is the vitamin C, the powdered vitamin C, which is such a high quality that you sent me, and the magnesium. If you take a lot, it can put you in the bathroom and give you a pretty good case of the runs. And that's too far too much. I would further say that probably if you did that for very long, you'd be washing all kinds of things out of your body you wish you hadn't. And so I think there's a balance. And anyone who's gone to the store to get decent versions of vitamin C is aware of this. Matter of fact, I didn't realize that some people use vitamin C and magnesium as an anti-constipation thing. But again, Clive, that was another problem I was having with the older folks that I'm responsible for that were losing their memory and their ability to recognize anything. When I went to the good fats like coconut butter, constipation is a thing of the past. I mean, not even an issue.
By the way, is there anything we should recommend to people, those who might be thinking, maybe I should boost my immune system a little bit, or whatever you want to consider your immune system? Any basic recommendations that they could tell their family and friends? They may be doing some things already if they're listening to this podcast.
Well, address the simple ones. If somebody is constipated, this is a dangerous, life-shortening situation, and simply drinking more water, having the right amounts of magnesium and vitamin C would certainly help. Not poisoning oneself. People are going to the store. It's absolutely incredible. And they're choosing food deliberately with poison. They could be picking organic, natural, seasonal stuff, but they're going in and if you read the label on most foods in an average supermarket, there are like 50 poisons, not just one. And so our immune system would be a hell of a lot stronger if we stopped buying food made by corporations with chemicals in, and hormones and God knows what. So I think that would be a good one to do. The next one would be to ensure that one does have decent nutrition going on. One of my favorite stories is this woman in a coma. She's been given 3 days to live, and they wanted to live. And so they boil up organic vegetables for 5 hours until they've all gone down to a mush. Then they strain off the mush with some muslin. Now they've got this clear liquid. And mum's in a coma, but they prop her up in bed and they spoon in half a teaspoonful of this nutritious liquid. And she doesn't die in the 3 days, which she's meant to do. She lives another 2 years. Similarly, look at what the carnivores do. The head of the pack of animals, they make the kill. And the first thing the head of the pack will eat is the liver. And so, there are many foods that have a good bang for the buck. They've got a lot of nutrition in pumpkin seeds. There are quite a few foods that are really great. But if the food's been processed, then it's by definition, it's going to lost a lot of its power. And the thing is that minerals last forever, but they're not in the soil, so they're not in the plants. Vitamins, on the other hand, tend to deteriorate with time and heat. So the orange or the red pepper might look fantastic still, but the vitamins might have literally more or less gone, even though it still looks all right. So one way or another, we're all starving to death, pretty much.
I've got a direct example of the food idea that you put out there. So my wife was going to the store, and I'd remembered when I was young, my grandmother always had those kippers. People in England will probably know right what that is. A little can tin. There's like a little key, or used to be a little key. I guess they don't do it that way anymore. And I remembered it because I liked it. It's like smoked herring, and it was in just a pure liquid. But I remembered even as a child going to my grandmother's house when I first found out about kippers and reading the label. And it was basically the ingredients were, I think it's smoked herring in, it was either oil or water. I forget which. That was it. And so I said to my wife, will you pick up some cans of kippers because they last forever and it's a good thing to have around in case of emergency. And I need to eat seafood from time to time. Well, they come back and I look at the ingredients and I'm like, holy smokes, what is this weird thing? I think it was some kind of salt. So I go look it up and I find out that the FDA is wording it in such a weird way as to be suspicious. And then I looked up the ingredient, which I can't remember the name of. I think it's some kind of salt. And it is one of the chief things all the animal community is being damn sure their pets don't get. And then I go further, and it's basically considered a poison. But when you go to what they're saying about the FDA, they find it acceptable in some weirdly worded way. And so there it is. Kippers are off the list again. You got to read those ingredients, don't you, Clive? I mean, people have no idea how hard it is to go into a grocery store and find foods that are acceptable.
Well, it is very difficult in the States because, of course, they're allowed to lie and not even declare you've got genetically modified organisms in the food. I mean, it's just insane. So, I mean, we have the power to choose where we shop, and if we want to beat the big corporate giants, we've got to choose to shop wisely and try and promote the small man. I mean, the ideal is to get to know the farmer, maybe have a day out helping them farm and buy some seeds. You like a certain variety, well, buy some seeds, give them to the farmer, and say let's plant these. Cut out the middleman of the corporations and the supermarkets. We should be, if we've got the space, growing our own food. Some people say, well, I'm on the 20th floor. How can I grow food? But it's easy. You get some mason jars or any glass containers, old jugs or whatever, and you get some seeds and you sprout them. I like chickpeas, garbanzos, and if I buy a kilo of that, by the time I've soaked them in water overnight, for instance, or that day, they've tripled in size right away, tripled in weight, and I've taken a dormant product, full of energy all last year, but waiting to burst through, and I've made it alive from dormant to alive. So probably I've increased the mineral and vitamin and amino acid content dramatically by many, many, many times by bringing it alive, and I've reduced my food costs by probably down to a quarter, because I've now got a kilo or 4 kilos where I had 1 kilo before, and you can make salads from freshly sprouted seeds. Sprouting celery seeds taste delicious. You just need a few of them, sprinkle them on. You've got fantastic flavors. So you don't need light to grow seeds. They sprout in the dark. They'll sprout in the light. They'll sprout anywhere. So we can be producing fresh food ourselves. And as time goes on, with the UNICEF saying they're going to be 1.2 billion, I can't remember the exact figure, but I mean, famine is being predicted. Food's going to be short and expensive. So the more steps we can take to be self-productive, the better. I was an organic farmer for 10 years. It's not that easy.
Clive, the things that always fascinate me are the older ways. I'm so into some of the older forms of supposed medicine from places like China. Every time, like in India, where you see the 3 pulse finger method used, love to learn more about that. And here's another thing. I watched a person, I think it was in India, go to an older holistic style or old Indian, maybe Ayurvedic type medicine. And the first things he did was he took the 3 pulse medicine, which is fascinating. Everyone should learn about it. Unreal that isn't just common practice everywhere. He looked at the eyes, he looked at the tongue, then he grabbed the hands, and this is all within a couple minutes, and he felt the fingernails and looked carefully at the hands. And what I noticed when my hand was gonna have to get surgery, my nail on the finger that locked up was not smooth or like domed. And now it is that I've been taking the magnesium. But my point is had I known even the most basic things, I would have understood from my nails that I was deficient in something. And yet it seems to me that so many of the older methods within the first few minutes of an old style doctor checking you out would have already had a clue about what might be going on.
It used to be normal for doctors to really prod you about, feel your liver, feel your kidneys. That was normal. They used to look down your throat, get the stethoscope out and listen to your breathing and your heart and so on. It was a hands-on thing. That seems to have disappeared completely.
No, now you do it by video, and that passes for. I've had the VA actually trying to set up video appointments, and I just said, "What's even the point of that? That's laughable to me."
Most people don't even get the opportunity to even talk to their doctors. Here, if they do, it's so 10 minutes per consultation. Whereas, if I talk to a client to advise them on their health, really I'd like an hour minimum, but 2 hours. It takes time to get down to the nitty gritty of things, particularly if it's an emotional issue that's causing the illness.
Yeah, that's another thing about the old Chinese methods before Western medicine crept in there. All these old sayings: if you've seen a doctor and he didn't prescribe diet, you haven't seen a doctor. Another idea that I was reading about not too long ago was if the doctor came to you in the old Chinese method and you weren't cured, he didn't get paid. There are just endless things that make common. There's another thing about how important the age of a doctor was, because in that culture, it was perceived if he was an elderly man, he had a whole lifetime of experience. But wrapped up in that was the idea that his human intuition for healing would have grown that time. And then there's all the ideas about the apprentice that the senior would have taken on. Just all from my point of view, common sense, valuable ideas wrapped up in these old medicine types or medical practice types.
Well, exactly. And I mean, it wasn't that many generations ago that we had to by default, know how to fix ourselves. When there wasn't transport and so on, people used to have a really, really good idea. The most treasured thing for a pirate was the medicine chest. That was their most valuable thing. They'd save that before food because it was the answer. And how many people these days know how to fix themselves, really? And one of the things I've been trying to do is to put together a bunch of knowledge and a bunch of products where it's not too expensive, that it's accessible. And what happens I had a client who got damaged and lost their hearing, right? Overnight, just bam, suddenly, and in place of it was tinnitus. So, what are you going to do if something sudden happens and, you really want to make sure you've got all the kit, sticking plasters, a thermometer, all the things you might need in case of any accident. And, if people are worried about vaccinations, if they're worried about, the viruses and so on, then there are all sorts of steps you can take to make you essentially bulletproof. I used to get a cold 3 times a year up until about 13 years ago. I made one change, which was adding vitamin D in winter. Never had a sniffle since. And everybody really needs to just master what sort of 10 or so basic products are. And It's also interesting, I think, to understand why they're so effective. I mean, fulvic minerals, for instance, what is it? Well, it's basically mud. Fulvic minerals are basically deposits from 30 million years ago, or much more recently, where in the middle of the forest, all life has fallen to the forest floor and has now become the soil. It's going to be digested by the fungus and so on. And everything that's ever lived or died is there. So the fulvic minerals that we've been talking about, they reckon are just over 30 million years old. That's when the deposit was formed. And then everything was bigger. Plants were way larger physically. There were many times more species than there are now, and things presumably weren't polluted at that point. So why fulvic minerals work so well, you need such a teeny tiny amount, is that they are everything. There is every amino acid, every trace element, everything is actually in there, be it in minute homeopathic amounts. But as always, there's always something about the whole, some synergy of the entire thing as nature intended it. And I had somebody just today who said they'd taken just iodine and fulvic minerals, and I was trying to remember what the result was. It was huge. Oh, yes, that's right. They had constipation all their life. In 1 day, no, sorry, 3 days it went. Iodine, fulvic minerals, constipation over. Right? 40 years.
Among the things you've sent me, I prize the fulvic every day. And as a matter of fact, Clive, I'll add to what you're saying. I am convinced that if you have any kind of cysts and things like that, and I mentioned the kind of sty-like thing my wife had, that went away in 3 days. She'd had it for years. She was actually thinking about going to some doctor to get it dealt with in Lord knows what way. 3 days, and I had like subcutaneous benign cyst-like things, and I'm reasonably sure it was the fulvic that made all that go away.
Iodine actually is well known for people who get cysts, fibroids. Often a lack of iodine is it's responsible. So it could be both.
Wow.
I'm just looking at the notes from this morning. The other things that changed for her, she said that she was crying every day of her life. That stopped. Nausea and vomiting, that stopped. Oh yeah, and that she said she smelt terrible. That her sweat smelt absolutely vile, and that ended. Of course, that would have been because she was poisoning herself from the constipation. But they should be teaching this stuff at school because it's so easy to understand. Of course, the soil should be a brilliant supplement in itself. If I had no money at all, but I had a bucket and spade, I'd go into the middle of the old growth forest, dig up some soil, find some spring water and make some muddy solution and strain it through some cloth. And now I've got some water with a load of minerals and everything. It would be a good way. Just like if you took all the food waste, from the vegetables and the nuts and the seeds, or whatever you're eating that's grown like that, and you burnt it on the fire until it was ash, or you just burnt wood down to ash. Ash is a brilliant supplement for minerals. Absolutely brilliant.
And natural C60, right?
That would be in the charcoal element of it, but just the pure ash alone is an incredible multi-mineral. And if you look at the ingredients of tinned cat food or dog food, or ash is a very common ingredient because it is nutritious. Sucking on coal would be nutritious, as many pregnant women have realized. Fulvic is not that far away from wood, not that far away from coal, if that makes sense. But the charcoal itself, the C60 charcoal, not activated, is a very powerful thing. I had a woman yesterday who arrived to see me. In fact, the same woman, she complained of a stomach issue. I gave her 6 charcoal tablets to take, and about 10 or 15 minutes passed, and it was, no, it's fine now. I think things should work quickly, particularly if you get the dose right. And then once you've found what the dose is, then you cut back. And if the symptoms come back, well, now you know what you need to take. But one wouldn't want to experience diarrhea really more than once. Experiencing it once, if that hasn't happened to you recently, can be a very good thing. The very first time I ever recommended that somebody did a bowel clear out, and I suggested psyllium husks, lots of water, and some clay, marinolite or bentonite clay. This woman said, "You never guess what came out this morning." She said the next day, so a small piece of yellow Lego. And she was in her late 20s, and she reckons she must have swallowed it at least 25 years back in the past. Been stuck there all that time. So good clear out every now and then might be worthwhile.
Well, that's how you clear out the pipes, huh?
Well, anyhow, guys, we got to wrap up hour one for this episode. Clive, why don't you very quickly give out your web address? And again, under every episode, there is a Clive DeCarl link in the upper left under every episode on my website, crow777radio.com. Clive, please give your contact.
Yeah, thank you. It is clivedecarle.com. So that's clivedecarle.com. And there is the shop there with some these basic products, and there are a couple of incredible offers going on vitamin C. It's all good. Then you can learn about the Secret Health Club, where the stuff that I can't put on the website, because we're not allowed to tell you the benefits of anything legally in England. So we have this thing called the Secret Health Club, where the secrets are revealed, you might say.
All right. Well, speaking of secret, when we come back in hour two, we're going to get into the so-called codenamed Tesla device. When we get into hour two, we'll actually state the real name. It's ridiculous, the things that go on in this world. How is it that a place like the AMA can be busy censoring people who just want to talk about healthy products? I mean, that's really, per se, you couldn't even really call it medicine, could you? Almost goes to show you that if the food supply was good in any given area, the health, for the most part, would probably be good or decent in any given area. But anyhow, that brings hour one of episode 299 to a close. Join us on the other side at crow777radio.com, CRROW777radio.com. And we're going to get into all the things we can't in public anymore. The censorship is beyond. And I'm not kidding. I probably will be walking away from Twitter soon. What's the point to play that clown show of a game? Anyhow, I would like to wish you all a happy, healthy, and higher-minded new era. And I hope to see you on the other side at crow777radio.com. Cheers.
Belief is the enemy of knowing.